You're listening to the 48th broadcast of TBR Radios, the TBR History Hour, with your host, TBR contributing editor, Dr. Edward DeVries. On today's show, Dr. Ed calls Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Kennedy to talk about the fake news that was the Vietnam War. Continuing the discussion of fake news, did you hear the joke that is President-elect Joe Biden?
I have an old MacBook from 2010, and that's not what I'm using now. I'm actually on my desktop, my iMac, but I've got an old MacBook from 2010, and I had it set up where it was running. I had partitioned the hard drive 3 ways, and I was running Windows 10, I was running Linux, and I was running the Mac operating, which that machine is nowhere near prepared to host. Long story short, it just was not a functional system because I didn't have enough hard drive space in any partition for any of those operating. Beta over the last couple of years has just been deteriorating. So, anyways, I decided to take it back to its original operating system of Lion, and I've been stepping it up. I'm not going to take it any further than Mojave, but right now I'm trying to get Mojave on it.
Oh, yeah. I'm having problems with mine right now. I got to call my Microsoft buddy. He worked for Microsoft for 20 years, and he came here and worked in our office, and he helped me fix mine, but my email is all screwed up, and it botched my email system completely.
So let me ask you this. You know, all those years you were in the military, and the military was using Microsoft software. I said this back in the early 90s. I said this back, when Windows 95 came out. I said that Bill Gates has to have a back door in all of this Microsoft software. And the day will come when he will use it to take over the world. And so, just as a military person, do you believe that there is a threat there? In other words, was I a prophet or was I paranoid?
I wouldn't say take over the world, but maybe become a significant influencing source in U.S. politics, which I think he is today. Almost having a monopoly. They need to break him up big time because he is dangerous. He's a left winger, and he's obviously got way too much influence in the digital world because he has his fingers in just about everything.
Well, our subject of conversation today is supposed to be the Vietnam War and the fake news of the Vietnam War. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you, since our listeners will actually be listening to this on Black Friday, what did you do for Thanksgiving?
We're going to go to Savannah and visit
Savannah,
my
Georgia?
youngest son. Yep, we're going to drive down tomorrow and stay with him for Thanksgiving.
So is your youngest son in the military?
No, he's the only one that didn't serve. The other 2 did, but he didn't. He's got some health issues that are causing major problems. So he is not doing extremely well. Fortunately, he married a great girl. She's a school teacher, and working it together, they can handle it. But if he didn't have her,
right,
we'd be up a creek.
So I remember in one of our early interviews, you had told me that your dad, who was your dad a brigadier general or a lieutenant general?
He was a brigadier.
And I remember you telling me how when you wanted to enlist in the Army, it was during the time of the Vietnam War, and your dad wasn't too thrilled with that decision.
No, he wasn't real excited about it. He had just come back from Vietnam on an extended tour, and he said, I'd really like for you to be a dentist or a doctor and make lots of money, and I can retire early.
So then were you happy that your son didn't follow in Dad and Grandpa's footsteps?
I don't know how good of a dentist I would be, but it doesn't excite me thinking about it. I had a great career. I worked for some great people, had great people around me. I had some real bad ones. but you tend to remember the real good ones. And I'm glad I did what I did. Going back today, I wouldn't join the Army because the Army is not the same Army. It is so politicized today. Political correctness is eating us up in the military. I wouldn't join it.
So then you're kind of glad that your son has pursued other things.
Yeah, I was not unhappy when he decided to leave because we could see the writing on the wall. He came in at the beginning of the Obama administration, actually before that, but he got commissioned during the Obama administration. He went to West Point in 2003. But the stuff that was going on, and I heard the wrath of the Army's political correctness, lost his career in Afghanistan, wrote a book about it. It's an outstanding book about the stupidity, of some of the military and what happened to him. His career was ruined. They came after him for they accused him of a war crime, and the question becomes, what defines a war crime? Well, it's whatever the lawyer that's prosecuting says it is. I mean, what this guy did was protect his troops, and he got prosecuted for it. So he lost his career. Young West Point officer, great guy, but he wrote a great book called Dog Company, and his name's Roger Hill. First time I ever read about him was in a Christian magazine. They interviewed him, and Roger's a ardent Christian man, and I was so impressed. I went and contacted him. He said he was writing the book, and I helped him edit the book for publication. The Army tried to stop it because they were so afraid that it was going to put the Army in a bad light. They held the publication up for about 2 years, and Roger finally went ahead and got it published. And they said, well, you're publishing, classified information. You're going to have to redact it. Well, I read the unredacted version. There's no classified information in there. That's their excuse to stop you from publishing. And Roger's not the only one that's had that happen. Others have had it happen to them.
You talk about Roger Hill. He had a friend of his, I think of John Hatley, because his girlfriend was a friend of mine, and she had called me just like the day before he was supposed to get out, and she was so excited.
Exactly. He was in Leavenworth. It just makes you mad. You read what these prosecutors do. Many of those JAG officers that they have now have never served in the combat arms. There are JAGs that have served in the combat arms and then go to be JAGs. My feeling is they all need to serve in the combat arms first before they become a JAG, so they get a perspective of what the Army's like. A lot of them come through these liberal institutions, and they think, this is how life works, and they live in an air-conditioned office somewhere in Afghanistan or Iraq. They don't understand what's going on in the field, and then they look for chances to go after these young troops who are trying the best they can to stay alive, and they prosecute some of them for the most incredibly stupid things. It's a waste of our money and time, and it puts a damper on the morale of the troops out in the field, because now everybody's trying to second guess if they're going to get charged with a war crime for trying to fight the bad guys. It is incredible.
Your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
Our subject today was going to be Vietnam. And it was going to be the fake news of Vietnam. And I remember a number of years ago, a book that I had read, somebody had given it to me. In fact, it was a fellow SCV guy in Texas who had given it to me when I was speaking there a number of years ago, maybe 20 years ago now. And it was called The First Casualty. I do not remember who wrote the book. I do remember reading the book. And the title of the book was The First Casualty. And, of course, the premise of the book was that truth is the first casualty of war and that the media is the one who exacts the kill. So why did you pick for the 12 greatest, call it wars or battles or military engagements, for us to discuss? How did fake news become one of those 12?
It affected our military. When I was teaching at the Army Staff College just a few years ago, we had a course that we taught the students on media relations in the military. That course has since been taken out. I guess the general, de jure, whoever the commander is now, decided it wasn't important and took it out. But that was one of the best courses we taught, because it explored how the media influences national policy, and it also influences down to the tactical level. So it's influencing strategic, operational, and tactical levels of war. And it's become almost another enemy that we have to contend with in the military. So when the president says the media are the enemy of the American people, that's a fact. The journalists, by and large, the large majority of them are liberals, and they see things through liberal eyes. They're not reporting the news now. They've become narrators with their own set of I'm trying to think of the word, their own interest to portray. And so, what we were teaching at the Army Staff College is you need to understand who you're dealing with and be careful, because they will wicker what you say and change the meaning to whatever they feel it should be. In World War II, the commanders they couldn't force the correspondents to self-censor, but they would ask them to say, look, we have an invasion coming up. We're going to give you, some insight on this, but you can't publish it until such and such a date. And the correspondents almost overwhelmingly, follow the rules and self-censor, because they knew American soldiers' lives were at risk. And so they were honorable about it, and they generally followed the rules. And so there was a mutual respect, between the press and the military. There are exceptions. Patton hated the press, but he'd use them for his own reasons. And you have a number of these journalists during World War II, because they were on board. They saw it as their patriotic duty. By the time Vietnam comes, you start having a real change in the mindset of journalism, and the way it was taught in colleges. You get this liberal element in there where they feel that their allegiance is to the story and to journalism, not to our country. So in World War II, the journalists were loyal to the country, but by the time Vietnam comes around, more and more of these journalists are loyal to their fellow journalists and the story rather than to the country. In 1985, there was a program run by major correspondents that served in Vietnam, and they posed a situation to them. One of them was Bruce Jennings, by the way, and said, this is a theoretical situation. This is 1985, 15 years after the war, 10 years after the end of the war. And they said, if you're in a country of, they called it North Kosan, and I guess the analogy is North Korea or North Vietnam. They said the enemy has allowed you to accompany their troops to the field, and they run across a situation where they can ambush an American patrol, and you're with the North Kosanese. What would you do? Would you warn the American patrol? And the journalists all said no, because we're there for the story. Our allegiance is to journalism, not the American soldiers. So they said, these Americans are going to get killed or, maimed or wounded, and you're not going to warn them? They said, no, we wouldn't want to do that because we'd violate our journalistic ethics. I'm not sure what those are, but they're not pro-American, that's for sure.
So you remember the movie Good Morning Vietnam?
Yes, sir.
All the news stories were coming off of the teletype, and they had the two fat guys sitting in the room who were sitting there and, scratching stuff off of the wire reports. And there was the scene where Robin Williams comes in and he grabs the news feed right off of the printer, and he walks into the booth and he starts broadcasting, and of course they turn him off. So then I'm guessing that the censorship was only directed at the troops. It wasn't directed at the American people back home.
That movie is largely fictional, based loosely on the fact there was a guy that did the broadcast Good Morning Vietnam. But a lot of that was fiction. It was made up. There is some truth to it, but a lot of it's very exaggerated. There was definite, censorship, and the object was, put a positive spin on it. So, there was some, no doubt, but it wasn't as bad as what the movie makes it out to be.
So why do you think that there was this change in the thinking
all back to education?
The people in the media.
The journalists typically attend liberal arts universities and colleges. They are typically not hard science people. They're into journalism, which is populated by very liberal people. These people have a warped sense of knowledge of history, if any history at all. For example, there's a young woman here who interviewed me the other day in the news about our Confederate monument coming down. And she's a nice young lady, very polite, but I'm guessing maybe 30 years old. And I said, we were talking after the interview and about things that, I work on. And I said, you're invited to come to meetings of Sons of Confederate Veterans or the Civil War Roundtable. They're open to the public. We don't have any secrets in there. You can come and we normally have a historical presentation at each of these. And she said, well, which one are you doing right now in the roundtable? I said, we're doing Vicksburg. And she said, oh. And she said, where's Vicksburg? I said, Vicksburg's on the Mississippi. I didn't want to insult her, but I felt like saying, are you joking me? You don't know where Vicksburg is? She had no clue about the battle or the campaign for Vicksburg. She had no idea. That's the education we're dealing with in a lot of these journalists. So what they have are soundbite pieces of knowledge, and they're influenced more by feelings and emotion than facts. We have Black Lives Matter here, and they're going, well, that statue, the Confederate statue, is racist. Really? A statue is racist? How can a statue be racist? And, they go, well, it stands for slavery. I said, where's the material that you're using to back that up? Because there's nothing that says that. That's your interpretation, what you want it to be. That doesn't make it true. Of course, these young journalists buy into it because it's all about emotion. It makes them feel good. Oh, yes, the blacks were slaves. It was terrible, and Confederates were around during slavery. Therefore, they must be for slavery. I'm going, okay, so the sky was blue during the war between the states. Does that mean the sky stands for slavery? That's the kind of logic they're using. And they don't know history. So in Vietnam, what we were running into are these liberal journalists who didn't understand communism. They don't understand it today. And they were thinking communism is just another political system. They didn't understand the communists have murdered probably 20 times more than Hitler ever imagined during the Holocaust. Mao murdered millions of Chinese, communism. Yet these people are going, well, these people are fighting for freedom in Vietnam. It's a civil war. It was not a civil war. The North, it became, well, it must be two equivalent systems fighting against each other, and they must be more right because they're Vietnamese and it's their land. the way they looked at it.
So do you think that any of these reporters, I mean, for example, I realize she wasn't a news reporter, but, Jane Fonda was obviously very pro-Vietnamese.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. And so do you think that there were people like her that were in the actual, journalistic media as well?
And comfort to the enemy, and the Vietnamese said this. The North Vietnamese said this. I'm sure the South Vietnamese did too.
And so do you think that they were actively hindering the war effort?
The American press was their ally, and they counted on it. And we know this because now the books that have come out after the war have stated this explicitly, that they knew the press was on their side and they were using it against us. Now, here's the interesting thing. In 2005, we captured an al-Qaeda document in Iraq. And you know what it said? They realized that the North Vietnamese were able to leverage our media against our effort. And the al-Qaeda people said we need to do the same thing. And this was in a declassified secret document that was declassified. And they said, we're going to do the same thing. And they also said, we realize that the North Vietnamese attrition warfare worked against the Americans because they'll tire out and leave. So we will do the same thing. We'll tire them out and they will go away. These people we're dealing with are not stupid. I mean, they understood.
Extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, read all about it.
So the president often refers to the media as the fake news. When you were in Vietnam, is that the way you thought of the news media?
The media was perceived by the military as being the enemy. We knew that we had to be very careful with them because of the spin they put on things. And despite the fact you could stand there and give them a positive story, they'd find some way to turn it negative and show it to the American populace. Walter Cronkite is a major case we used in our studies at the Army Staff College. Here's a guy that during World War II was a very pro-American journalist, but by time of Vietnam, this guy has kind of changed his views, and I wouldn't say he's anti-American, but what he did was anti-American. And at the Tet Offensive, he essentially gave a win to the North Vietnamese who had gotten whacked. These guys had lost Tet. The communists got whacked. Yet, communist broadcasting system and Walter Cronkite turned it around and said, the Americans are in trouble. You know, the war will go on forever. This is an indication. And they're going, woe is us. You know, this shows that we're screwed. And the bottom line is we emasculated the Viet Cong. They never were able to return to the strength they were before Tet. The North Vietnamese army got creamed. They did not come back until 1972 during the Easter Offensive. So for 4 more years, they kept a low profile because we absolutely creamed them. And then in 72, they came back, and we applied air power to them, and the South Vietnamese were holding, most of the lines back then. And that pushed them off until 75 when we were completely out of Vietnam. And then they won not by counter an insurgency. A lot of people go, oh, look, the guerrillas won the war. No, the guerrillas didn't win the war. It was a massive conventional invasion by regular North Vietnamese army that won the war. But the press was not our friend. They did us very bad disservice because they turned people against the war, and it just was bad stuff for the Americans when the press was making it look like the North Vietnamese were the good guys. The communists were the bad guys. They still are.
So what was it like then?
Northern part of Vietnam was doing extremely well against the communists. So, hearing these stories of how bad things were, and then you talk to the people on the ground, they're going, yeah, we're whacking them. We're doing great things in Vietnam, protecting. And, oh, by the way, we're going out and whacking on the North Vietnamese army and killing lots of them. Measure of effectiveness, that's attrition warfare. And they said, well, it's not attrition warfare. No, it's not. It's counterinsurgency. But attrition has a lot to do with it. If you take their capability to fight away from them, then it's a lot easier to implement your counterinsurgency strategy. And so you don't want somebody breathing down your neck with an AK-47. You need to kill them so that you can go in and do your counterinsurgency strategy in the countryside. And that's what we did. It was turning around. But the Americans had been turned against it by the press, and it was a hostile press. CBS, I jokingly say, Communist Broadcasting System, they did us no favors.
So, you call that Communist Broadcasting System, and you were doing that back in the 70s, and we all thought it was clever in the 90s when my generation referred to CNN as the Clinton News Network.
Welcome to the Christendom Curriculum. Every parent who decides to homeschool wants to secure a great education for their child, while also saving time and money. But these days, many parents have another concern. They also want a homeschool curriculum without all the multiculturalist, politically correct diversity doctrine that's really little more than a thin disguise for an anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-Western civilization bias. Now there is such a curriculum. The Christendom curriculum gives your children a complete education in Bible, history, literature, and more, focusing on the classic academic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we also tell the story of Christendom, the story of the Christian nations, especially as Christ's kingdom has been historically manifest in the nations of Europe and America. And we do so without apology. The Christendom curriculum is the only Christian nationalist homeschool program you'll find. We support the right of the European and American peoples to their historic Christian cultures against the globalist leftists who want to destroy those cultures. Not only that, but we provide assigned reading courses for various hot-button subjects in our current culture wars, including feminism, social justice, and cultural Marxism, among others. These reading courses will teach your kids how to survive a social justice warrior attack, how to debate with leftists on social media, how to reform their local churches and communities, and more. We're living in a time of tremendous historical and social change. Christians have the opportunity now to begin building the culture and civilization of the next 1,000 years and beyond. It's an exciting time to be alive. So if you want to help raise the next generation of culture warriors, if you want your children to grow up with a love for Christ's kingdom and for their own nation, while at the same time learning how to defend America and rebuild the West, the easy-to-use Christendom curriculum is for you. Click the Learn More button to get in on the action. And thanks for listening.
So what you're saying is that while the media had everybody back home convinced that the Americans were losing the war in Vietnam, that in reality the Army and the Marines were over there kicking butt and taking names.
1969, I'm going to have to go back and look at my notes on this. There's an excellent video out by AIM, Accuracy in Media. It turned out an excellent 2-hour special that countered the claims in the TV special on Vietnam that came out, that documentary series that came out in the 1980s, that got put in every high school in the country and teaches bad history. And there's a lot of false claims in that video series. It's awful. But it went out, and people, because it's on video, they believe it. But the problem is, a lot of the claims they made were absolutely, totally false. There was a huge pro-military parade in New York City. The media did not cover it. They ignored it. It went for hours, millions of people, yet the media conveniently overlooked it. That's the kind of stuff that goes on today. You know, Trump does something great, and the media just conveniently doesn't even look at it, doesn't cover it.
So talking about President Trump, you know, obviously President Trump, you know, he's not hesitated to call fake news. He's not hesitated to, you know, basically look right at a reporter at a press conference and basically say, you lie. You know, he's not hesitated to send out tweets basically contradicting the things that people are seeing on the television. Why didn't Nixon just get up and say that? Why didn't Nixon he was the commander-in-chief. He had to know what was going on over there. He had to be getting reports from his generals. Why didn't he just get up on television and just call the whole thing fake news and just tell everybody, hey, you know, forget what you saw on the 6 o'clock news. We're beating the you-know-what out of the North Vietnamese right now.
They were. You know, the paradigm was, his World War II paradigm was, the press is our friend. They're going to, you know, portray us as heroes, and they'll get along great with us. And things changed, but Nixon didn't realize it. And none of the other presidents realized it. Even the Bushes. You know, they just went along, let the press beat the snot, correct the record. But it was not happening. And unfortunately, they got away with it until Trump got in there. And he's calling them out. And he's absolutely, totally right. If you look at all the studies that have been done on journalists and news media outlets, they are heavily influenced with leftists. I mean, these people it's not a balance in there. You don't have 50% Democrats, 50% Republicans or conservative. You have very heavy leftist influence in the media. I'm talking about like 85%. So, you know, 8 out of 10 on print or news media journalists are leftist. They see the world very differently than we do. And it goes back to this business of, you know, knowledge of history. A lot of them just don't know what they're talking. He was a national level recognized historian. Great. He wrote some really good stuff on how ignorant people are of history. One of the things he said, let me get my paper out right here, because it's fascinating. Here's another one, not from Bruce Cole. It says here, seniors scored an average of 53.2. This is colleges scored an average of 53.2 on a 60-question civics test. That's an F. More than half the college students could not identify correctly the century in which the Jamestown colony was founded or the name of the battle that ended the American Revolution. Truly frightening. More than half also did not know the Bill of Rights forbids federal government from establishing a national religion. These are college seniors. So if these are college, and that's 50%, 53.2, 5 out of 10 of them have no idea on basic college, you know, stuff they ought to know, then what about the people who don't go to college? You know, they don't have higher education. And that's sad. What should Americans know about, especially on the military? They have no idea what it's like to serve. So they have a very interesting perspective that's not based largely on actual knowledge. It's based on perception. So they see movies like Private Benjamin or Saving Private Ryan. That's how they think the military is. Full Metal Jacket is their impression of what it's like in the Marine Corps. Now, Full Metal Jacket's not a bad movie, but, you know, it's not real life. So a lot of these people are making reports or perceptions are generated by them that are not based on facts. In real life, it's based on emotion, and they don't really understand. And the sad thing is it comes out in bad reporting and biased reporting, especially on things with the military. You know, they want to believe the worst case without getting all the facts sometimes. And that's the problem we have. Many of the views they have are not pro-American. And it comes from the liberal education and backgrounds that they've come from.
Are there any efforts that are being made in the military today to counter the fake news?
Well, the military does
pretty much just getting a free pass to do what they want.
And it tries to put a positive spin. I mean, that's the whole purpose. They have public affairs officers who are trained as public affairs officers to handle this. and they do the best they can to counter the negative opinions and negative stories that come out. And, transparency is important. They realize that. But remember, their job is to put a positive spin on it to make the military look good. The journalists always suspect something's being hidden. They have the attitude that, you must be hiding something from us, and there's something really bad going on, when a lot of times public affairs guys are saying, no, don't read into the problem more than what's there. There may have been something bad, but, we want to portray the positive image. So it's kind of competing views of the world, and they have to come to an understanding. And the public affairs officers do know that the journalists largely report based on perceptions that are not based on truth, because they've never served. They don't understand. At the same time, a lot of them have leftist agendas they want to fulfill, and they're never going to give a break to the military. They're going to look for everything negative they can find. So it's a tough road to hoe. The public affairs officers are trained in this, how to deal with the media, what's going on. We want the media to report. It's an open society. We want them to know about the military. But at the same time, we don't want them to harp on all the negative things they see or turn positive stories negative for no reason other than their own personal agenda. We got rid of the course at the Command and General Staff College on Media Relations, which is a mistake. That was a great course that we taught, and it really did help a lot of the officers coming through there to deal with the media when they left.
So when you were teaching at the Army Staff College, even with the elimination of that class, was this a subject of your teaching in any way? And if so, yes. How did you kind of integrate it into other things?
We integrated it into our exercises. We had actual journalism students from the University of Kansas, which is a very left-wing university, come up, and they would come to our exercises and actually act as journalists. And so, we integrated into our coursework there.
So what would happen if a military commander just decided that he wasn't going to have the press corps travel with his army, or
there's
he
a couple
just
of things.
wasn't going to give them information? What would the result of that
number
be?
Two, General Grant was very cognizant of this during the war between the states. And as much as he didn't like the press, and of course Sherman despised journalists, he said he ought to shoot them all. But Grant used them to his own works, and he made them sort of inside friends so that they would give good press to his army. So he knew how to use them, despite the fact he did not like them. But today, you can't make them go away. I mean, you're told they're going to be there, and they're going to be able to see it. And a lot of the times, the military wants them there so they don't sit in some headquarters inventing stories that aren't true. So putting them with the troops is a good thing, so they can actually see what goes on.
So are there any members of the media today?
Yes.
That you got to know when you were in the military?
Well, I can't remember some of their names.
Do you feel at liberty to go ahead and tell me who they are and what you think about them?
Is a writer, but she was a journalist. She came to many of the exercises at Fort Leavenworth, and Deb Goodrich has written a number of books, and she's a very prolific article writer, but she was also very pro-military. And, we got to be good friends because, she looked for the positive things to report. And on the negative stuff, she gave both sides, said, hey, here's what's going on, but here's the other side of the story. So, Debbie Goodrich is one of my friends still. We're good friends.
So, for example, Geraldo, he spent a lot of time in the Middle East, during the First Gulf War, Second Gulf War, and so forth. And I believe he was pro-military, and I believe, that he was a good guy. Don't always agree with all of his politics, but I don't think that he was doing anything there to undermine
during the invasion of Iraq, because he gave away the plans, drawing it in the sand after they had let him. I told you during World War II, they'd let the media know ahead of time, hey, we're doing an invasion, just don't let it out. until after it happened. Well, he went in the middle of the operations, was talking on TV, on live TV, drawing in the sand, talking about what was happening. And that's how you get Americans killed. So he did blunder one time really badly. They kicked him out of theater for that. But yes, you're right. Generally, I think he's pro-American.
Right. But yet, Anderson Cooper was also over there. He appeared to be, pro-American. He appeared to be, whatever over there.
Yes, exactly.
But yet, those of us who know him kind of knew better.
Didn't want to, spark some sort of anti-military tirade on the news.
You had told me earlier that you had a story about a Marine in the media. Go ahead and read that to us.
He sees a little girl leaning into the lion's cage. Suddenly, the lion grabs her by the cuff of her jacket, tries to pull her inside to slaughter her under the eyes of screaming parents. The biker jumps off his Harley, runs to the cage, hits the lion square on the nose with a powerful punch. Whimpering from pain, the lion jumps back, letting go of the girl. The biker brings her to her terrified parents, who thank him endlessly. A reporter has watched the entire event. The reporter, addressing the Harley biker, says, "Sir, that's the most gallant and brave thing I've ever seen a man do in my whole life." Harley biker replies, "Why, it was nothing really. The lion was behind bars. I just saw this little kid in danger and acted as I felt right." The reporter says, "Well, I'll make sure this won't go unnoticed. I'm a journalist. Tomorrow's paper will have this story on the front page. So, what do you do for a living, and what political affiliation do you have?" The biker explains, "I'm a U.S. Marine, and I'm a Republican." The journalist leaves. The following morning, the biker buys the paper to see the news of his actions and reads on the front page, big letters, "U.S. Marine assaults African immigrant and steals his lunch." That pretty much sums up the media's approach to the news these days.
So if you were in charge of everything, what would you do differently? I mean, what would be or is there just, and of course, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, or is it not necessarily easy on this to be an armchair quarterback? But if you were in charge of everything,
I would credential every journalist. Do you think
there's a solution, and what would you implement?
To include foreign journalists, would have to attend courses on the U.S. military before they went out and started reporting on it. Now, that's not going to ever happen. A free press is integral to our society and our culture. It's not to everybody's. So a lot of these countries that send journalists from their press corps, they don't come from free countries a lot of times, and the press is heavily censored. But I think we can influence our press, our, NATO and those countries that belong to these treaty organizations. Tell them, if you want to go report, you have to go through a course to familiarize you with the military and to understand what you're seeing, because a lot of these people, go out there for 2 hours and then run away. You remember in the movie We Were Soldiers Once and Young, at the very end, you see all these journalists helicopter into the landing zone, X-ray, and they get off the helicopter and all they see is the result of the battle. So they're going to go back and write a story, but who has the real facts? Joe Galloway does, because he was actually there during the battle. And he was pulling triggers on guns. So, that's the kind of guy you want, is a guy like Joe Galloway who actually experienced it and knows what's going on because he's been there, instead of somebody that flies in and flies out. And there was a message in that scene. They did that on purpose to show how these people coming out in very clean clothes with cameras strapped to them, and they were going to be there for an hour, get a story, and then run back to Saigon and drink beer that night. Galloway stayed in the field, drank nasty water, ate sea rations with the troops if they even had something to eat, and he actually walked the ground with the troops. So, we could understand it. It was like Ernie Pyle in World War II. They respected him because he experienced what they were doing.
So you talk about movies, and of course you were a career military man. My grandfather was a career Marine, and a lot of times he would sit there and we would be watching a film, especially like some of those old John Wayne, war movies.
Yeah.
And thoroughly like the way Hollywood portrayed war. He's like, it wasn't like that at all. And yet, I remember sitting there, and he had tears in his eyes watching. We were in a movie theater in Calumet City, Illinois, and he had tears in his eyes watching Rambo 3. And I think in that case, that was more the way he wished it would have turned out than the way it actually was. But what's it like for you as a career military guy, and especially somebody who is a student of history and who taught military history for as many years as you did?
My wife hates
What's
being
it like
in the
for
same
you to watch
room
these
because
war movies?
I pick them apart. I pick out everything. And there's some good war movies, but a lot of them are, but not a whole lot. It's a fictional story, but a lot of people watch these movies and think that's the way it really was. So a lot of people, military guys love watching war movies together because we'll sit there and nitpick them apart going, they would have never used that tactic. That machine gun's fired like 50,000 rounds and hadn't run out of ammunition. That has he can aim at anything at 500 yards and hit it. Most soldiers. We're just talking about the stuff that we've experienced, and it's kind of fun. You watch movies like, doggone it, the Forrest Gump. And that's a funny movie. I mean, you see some stuff in there. There's some humor, and you go, "I remember that happening to me." Or Forrest Gump is not bad. It's actually a pretty, it's authentic in the way it portrays fictional accounts. I mean, the uniforms are right. We sit there and try to nitpick the uniforms apart and the equipment, going, they didn't carry those kind of rifles then. They carry these kind of rifles. Everything in Forrest Gump, was exactly right on. Their military advisor did a great job. And they listen to him. That's the important thing. You can get these military advisors. I've had friends as military advisors for movies, and the producers don't have to listen to them. They can say, okay, you told me they're carrying M16s, but we're going to give them ray guns. Just stupid stuff. And it ruins the authenticity of the movie. Like the movie that came out in 1975, A Bridge Too Far. It could have been a great movie as far as authenticity, but they screwed it up with Vietnam language and haircuts that would have been Vietnam era instead of World War II haircuts. That's the kind of stuff that aggravates military guys. Make it the way it was, not the way you want it to be. So there's a friend of mine that was teaching a course at Fort Leavenworth. He's still there on faculty. He runs a course in the leadership department. They have war movies, and you sign out a war movie, and then you write a leadership paper about it, using it as a leadership example. And there's some great leadership movies that are out there. Tom Bradbear does this, and his course is one of the most two electives at the staff college. They jokingly call it movies for majors because most of them are majors. They have a few lieutenant colonels, but you don't watch it in the class. You take it home and watch it. Then you come in on leadership in the regular leadership course that we taught. And the reason is it reflects very accurately what happened in World War II in 8th Air Force. In fact, the guy that actually was the advisor in the movie was one of the people portrayed in the movie, and he said that's as close to the way it really was as we can make it in a movie. So that gives it a lot of credibility, street cred, because we weren't there. So if he says it was accurate, then you got to believe the guy that was being portrayed in the movie who actually did these things was saying it's as close as you could get in a movie. So I like war movies. I think they're great, but you got to take them with a grain of salt. And I grade them. I look at the war movie and I grade them, on a scale of 1 to 10, actually 1 to 100, because I'll get down to that's 82.36% accurate. And I'm being facetious, but what I mean is that, there's 20%, almost 20% baloney that's put in by Hollywood, and 80% of it's pretty good. It's close to real life.
So were there any of these war movies that you made your students watch when you were teaching?
And I had a bunch of recommended movies because Tom Bradbear, my friend who ran that elective, turned out a wonderful list of every war movie in English that's been pages long and number 10 font of all these neat movies by period. He does it by period. He's, ancient history, Renaissance period, medieval, whatever. He puts them by period and, classifies them so that it's more easy to fit into our instruction. But, I had a whole list of movies that I gave to the students and said, here's what I would recommend if you want to do this additionally. I couldn't make them do extra stuff, but I would recommend it to them and say, this movie is a great one to use with this course or this class. One of my favorites is Tunes of Glory with John Mills. It was made back in the early 60s, maybe late 50s. But it's a great, great movie about leadership.
So what was your teaching point?
Don't trust them. They tell you, journalists will say, this is off the record. Nothing is off the record. Everything is on the record. Be prepared. That's the biggest lesson I would tell them to learn. Be careful. They're not your friends.
Well, of course, you've
sir.
read and you helped me with my book, General Patton in His Own Words. There were a few quotes in there that, of course, Patton was giving to the press, and he prefaced the quote by saying, "Don't quote me on this."
He knew they would. I think he was being very funny about it, because don't quote me on this. He knew they were going to quote him. Yeah, we used to tell our students in the course, there is no such thing as an off-the-record interview. Everything you say can be used against you in a court of public opinion, so be very careful what you say.
Yes or no, bottom line, did the press influence the outcome of the Vietnam War, or did it play out the way it should have militarily without their having had that powerful of an influence upon it? I'm not saying they didn't influence public opinion, but did they actually influence the outcome of the war itself?
You had Tet Offensive in early 1968. The press turned that against the American military and forced us to draw down due to political pressure. And in 1975, when South Vietnam was invaded, despite the fact that President Nixon had promised the South Vietnamese we would assist them in repelling the invasion by giving them material support and air power, the press forced the Congress, or encouraged the Congress, to completely, totally pull out, which we did, and we left the South Vietnamese hanging. But that was the media. If the media had been on our side, I think that the war could have been won, because the North Vietnamese knew how to use them. They knew they had an ally, and they could generate enough anti-war feelings in the United States using our journalists to cause us to pull out. And they did.
So Nixon's whole peace with honor.
It was a politician's way of saying we're
What was your opinion of that?
I mean, that's kind of that's a political statement. It's kind of baloney, peace with honor. He knew the communists weren't going to follow the treaties we signed with. They broke every one of them.
Right.
Those are bad people. They don't have Judeo-Christian ethics. A signature on a piece of paper means nothing to them. And that's the problem Americans have. We tend to judge other people based on our culture and life views. We have a Judeo-Christian ethic, but that's not everybody else's view. Communists don't feel that way. They're anti-Christian, anti-Jewish. They don't have a problem breaking promises. It's like North Korea. Everything they've signed means nothing. They've broken all their treaties. So why do we keep doing it? It's just stupid. What they understand is a big stick.
So, the president now is wanting to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. Do you think he's making a big mistake, or, do you think Afghanistan is essentially another Vietnam, or do you think the president's doing a good thing? Obviously, the media is obviously covering Afghanistan differently than it did Vietnam because the political objectives are different. But what do you think as far as, comparing the withdrawal from Vietnam to the
they are sort of comparable
to, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and they may not even be comparable. I don't
know. Their government to take up their share of the load. But my feeling is they don't want their freedom more than the Taliban wants to be in charge. They don't want their freedom more than the Taliban wants to be in charge. So the Taliban's willing to die for Allah, and go kill these infidels who have worked with the U.S. And the Afghans are not the most reliable military. They have a bad habit of running away and throwing their weapons down, which is just odd because they are a martial race as people, but it depends on what they're fighting for and with whom they're fighting with. If it's a warlord, they're fighting for booty. If they're the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, they're fighting for Allah. That's a powerful motivator, and I don't think the Afghan army and the military has that same motivation. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to pull out, and in 5 years it will be back to the way it was in 2000, with the bad guys running the country and murdering all the innocent people. I hate to be a cynic about it, but I think that's the way it's going to be. And the only way we can prop them up is to be there. And I don't think it's our business to be there. And I don't want my kids, going to serve there. That, I've already had that happen. For what reason? They didn't die for nothing. My friends who lost children there, and I have several who lost their kids in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I never say they lost them for nothing. That we went to do something noble. But there's a point where after 20 years of doing this, we're not making a whole lot of progress. We need to cut bait and get out. Just let them handle it. If they can't, then we'll go back and whack them again. But we don't need to just be constantly there, draining our money from our national treasury and the lives of our young people.
The big talk right now is what's going to happen on January 20th. And there's talk that the military would forcibly remove the president from the White House. And
they wouldn't have to. He's not going to need to be forcibly removed. I mean, that's all kind of, I think that's tinfoil hat speculation. The military's not going to get involved. It's not going to happen.
So what I see happening, and unless barring some kind of a miracle, is however illegitimate he's going to be, is Joe Biden will very temporarily be the 46th president, and Kamala Harris will then become the 47th. Of course, that is assuming Barack Obama was actually the 44th, but let's not get things. Right. Yeah, but for the sake of easy math, let's just say 44, 45, 46, 47. What do you think the reaction will be? And I'm not saying that they won't follow orders. But what do you think the reaction of the military is going to be?
It would be very dangerous for even people to even talk about, a coup. I mean, it's not going to happen because there's enough people in the military that understand how our government's supposed to work and that the civilians run the military. They're not going to do that. I mean, people talk about their speculation. Not going to happen, I can guarantee you. It would never happen.
Hello, I'm Tom Strain, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. The Confederate flag, Confederate symbols, and the reputation of our Confederate ancestors has come under attack. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is actively fending off our detractors, but there is only so much that we can do. We need your help. Contact your local, state, and national elected politicians and tell them that you will not tolerate these attacks on our heritage. You can also visit scv.org, download an application to join us in our fight to preserve our Southern heritage. Visit scv.org today. If you don't have a Confederate ancestor and you are tired of American history disappearing, you can assist us by becoming a friend of the SCV. Please visit scvheritagedefense.org and make a donation to the Heritage Defense Fund. We hope that you will join us in the fight to defend the Confederate soldiers' good name.
Well, I hope that everybody had a great Turkey Day. Today is Black Friday, so go to www.barnesreview.org, get you some sweet deals on some of the books there in the bookstore, and take advantage of our holiday gift subscription to the Barnes Review magazine. It'll be one of the smartest things you'll do this year, and it'll be one of the best Christmas gifts that you can give to yourself or someone else. Anyways, we are out of time. Come back again, same time, same place next week. We'll have another great show for you. Until then, God bless.